The Second World War took place in my lifetime. As a young 3.5-year-old, I was evacuated from Britain on what was thought to be the eve of a German invasion and sent by sea to Canada. I returned to Britain in April 1944, just before Hitler's secret weapon, the rocket bombs, showered down on London. And I was in Britain on the night that the war ended, and remember the tremendous excitement when Hitler and Mussolini were burnt atop a vast bonfire in the village to which I'd been evacuated in England. I've always been interested in the Second World War. I've written a history of the Second World War, and my Atlas of the Second World War is a culmination of my work and my researches. It contains 247 maps, and they cover every aspect of the war. The war on land, the war at sea, the war in the air, the war in Europe, the war in the Far East, the war in the Pacific. It covers the fate of the civilians caught up in war, the mass deportations, the mass slaughter of civilians, the mass destruction in the Far East of Chinese civilians, Korean civilians, the mass destruction in Europe of Jews, Gypsies, and civilians in every land. It covers slave labor. It covers prisoners of war, British, American, Canadian, Italian, German, the fate of prisoners of war, the fate of prisoners of war in Europe, and the fate of prisoners of war in the Far East. It contains many maps on the economics of the war, on the raw material problems of the countries at war. It contains maps about supply. It contains maps about war plans, about what Germany hoped to do vis-à-vis Russia, of what different countries envisaged as their way forward to victory. It has maps about the German search for an atomic bomb and the American search for an atomic bomb. I've tried to cover many aspects of the war that need to be graphically shown. Part of the strength, I think, of this atlas is that one gets a concept of the wide range of the war, of how it covered every single corner of the globe, of how nobody was not affected by the war. I even have a map of the neutral countries showing how they were affected by the war and indeed often benefited from it. And my final set of maps show the aftermath of the war. I show the war graves. I show the numbers of those killed, military and civilian, in every country, totaling up to more than 45 million dead. And I show also the reconstruction after the war, the remarkable work done by the United States under the Marshall Plan to put Europe back on its feet. And I try to show throughout the human aspects of the war. Many of the maps have on them, as part of the map, the story of individual heroism, individual bravery. That, I think, is what the war was about. It was about a global contest, but it was also about the human ability to survive amid terrible storms and terrible threats, to remain human, to remain courageous, and to believe that victory would bring not only victory, but peace for the world.